Ladies and gentlemen, we are live.
Hello and welcome back to ProAm Predictions. I am Paul O'D on the amateur side, and of course on the pro side, as always, we have Bellator bantamweight contender Brian the Pike Man Moore. How are you doing this week, Brian?
Hey, what's up, Paul? How are things?
Very good, very good. Now, we're going to have to, before we get into any fights, we are going to have to touch on our record a little bit and kind of explain ourselves and how we've been going. I believe we're both 10, or is it 11 and 16 so far, both of us. We're paired up at 11 and 16. But you want to explain yourself?
Yeah. No, there is no explanation. It's just been a fucking mad year. But look it's been great because this is why we love the sport, isn't it? You know what I mean? Now, let's be honest. The two of us have been fucking pretty outlandish with our bets of the week and whatnot as well. Let's be, but with our actual record and picks, it's so many underdogs have won this year, which is great, which is fucking cool. It's great to see, and which makes this sport so fantastic. You know, boxing, it's a lot easier to predict, but we're in the MMA business, aren't we?
That's it, exactly. And I do actually have some numbers on that, just so we can excuse ourselves some more. This year so far, it's almost 40%, just 38% of underdogs have won across all cards so far. And there's more of a lean on the main cards, which we've been picky on. So if anyone wants to hate on us, at least consider that before you do.
That was I said I don't mind, like I'll accept my defeat, but that was the biggest bitch move, bringing up these statistics of why your record is so shit. We're wrong.
I can't wrap my head around it. I normally have a fairly good record. I'm normally 60% win, and I'm about 40% win at the moment. Like it's painful, absolutely painful.
Well, look at it. If you like, we've went down through the cards each and every week, and there's some that you'll say, oh, these are definites, and they're not. Like even look at last week is a great example. Like you had Curtis Blades, who on paper is he's a phenomenal fighter, but he's so well rounded against a guy who has one chance of beating him, and he pulled it out of the bag yet again. And it's like I said, I don't bet on heavyweight fights for that reason. But like that's just been one of many stories this year regarding how
Conor McGregor, of course.
Yeah. Look, it's been a phenomenal year so far, and March Madness starts in less than a week, or in a week's time. So I can't fucking wait. You know what I mean? Like as good as this card is, without sounding like a dickhead, I can't wait to see the back of it till we get into March because there's so many good fights. But anyway.
I believe you have some fight news that you're going to be announcing in the coming days or the coming weeks on your social media as well.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this one, Paul. I won't say anything. We've verbally agreed, both sides, so ready to put pen to paper, and then we'll break the news soon.
Excellent. Looking forward to seeing who that is. But I suppose we better get into some fights for this week, and we will start, of course, with the main event. You have Jairzinho Rosenstruik versus Ciryl Gane in another heavyweight fight, and you don't bet on heavyweights fights, so we have the same dilemma again this week. But this is a phenomenal one. Both guys technically gifted strikers. Both guys on relatively big win streaks. I know Rosenstruik had that loss to Ngannou in his second to last, but 11 wins outside of that. And Gane, of course, undefeated at 7-0. Both guys big finishers as well. What do you make of this fight?
This fight sums up the card, to be honest, where I feel like the matchmakers hit it out of the park. Every matchup is so even, where it's a toss of a coin. And I like both guys. If it turns out to be a complete another striking affair, if it turns out to be a kickboxing match with 5-5s with 4-ounce gloves, I'm putting my money on Rosenstruik. However, I think Gane does have more tools if he can get to work on the grappling, and it might be even just completing the takedowns, Paul. It might be, attempting takedowns, putting him to defense, wearing Rosenstruik's arms out. You know what I mean? Just being a bit more diverse in his attacks and having Rosenstruik thinking about the levels. So yeah, it's a fantastic fight. It'll just be down to who has the better IQ on the fight IQ. Yeah. Whoever's going to put their game plan in place, that's who's going to win this. Who's your pick for it?
Yeah, so you talked about the diversity of the more well-rounded game in Gane, and I actually think even on the feet, they're both technically gifted strikers, but I think on the feet he changes things up a little bit better. He does better body work, and he switches it up better between the leg kicks, the body work, and the head strikes. If you take even just, they both fought JDS in their last fight, and they were both very similar fights. I think the big difference in the Gane, the way he dismantled JDS, was those body strikes and the body kicks. And I think it played a big part. Now, I know leg kicks was a huge part for both parties. Yeah, for me, I think Gane wins it on the feet or wins it on the mat. I just think he's a little bit better rounded. But it's one of those where either one could go to sleep. At the drop of a hat, one strike puts either to sleep. But I'm going to go with Gane by TKO.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick Rosenstruik on the opposite side, and again, it's something that I will not be putting money on. I think this is a very competitive fight. Again, it's a heavyweight fight where anything can happen. Big men wearing 4-ounce gloves, all it takes is one shot. But I'm gonna go with Rosenstruik. I think the little bit more experience that he has will pay off. One thing we didn't touch on is the conditioning of both men. Now, will it make out of 2 or 3 rounds? I'm not sure. It's often what happens when you got 2 high-level strikers is they almost nullify each other because they've seen it. They've sparred thousands of rounds. They've seen high-level competition and sparring and competition.
Yeah.
And but I don't see. I think Rosenstruik will land, and I think that he'll get the TKO. But again, I'm not putting money on this one. I'm looking forward to this fight.
Yeah, and actually, both men have only seen a decision once in their careers. So yeah, you're right. That the cardio is going to be a big thing, especially with this being a five round fight. I think neither guy is going to go out tentative because they're aware of that. So I expect to see fireworks in the opening 2 rounds.
Yeah, but like you said, Ciryl Gane, he'll work the body, so he could drain Rosenstruik's tank. That being said, the man who probably gets that a little bit more tired is probably the man who's going to get clipped. You know what I mean, and make that mistake. But yeah, very intriguing fight.
Yeah, and we move on to the co-main event, and I'm massively excited for this one: the return of Magomed Ankalaev after his destruction of Jan Kutalaba last year. And of course, Ankalaev had that ongoing back and forth with Kutalaba that spanned basically the whole of 2020 after their first bout. And he's going in against a very tough Nikita Krylov. Krylov, of course, look, he's made a career of being that, I wouldn't say gatekeeper, I think that's an unfair term to use for a guy, but he's been found out a little bit against the elite level in that division. But he's knocked off a lot of guys that have been coming up towards the top 10. Like, I mean, the guy has a submission win over OSP. OSP is a master of submissions. Like, he's a very tough guy to get out of there. And his latest won a win over Walker as well. So he proves he can deal with the big striker. How do you see this fight going? Are you excited for this fight?
Yeah, I think it's a great fight. If again, you look at the card now, saying about the matchmakers doing a fantastic job. This is probably the fight where I see more of an obvious winner. Now, both men are great and they're excellent, but Ankalaev, he's looked superb ever since he got into the UFC. Even his win or his loss against Paul Craig, I still remember it. They talked about him so much in the fight. He was dominant in that. And next minute, Paul Craig pulled out that triangle. Was it the last minute? Was it?
Yeah.
It was a phenomenal performance up to then, and it was, don't get me wrong,
the fight could have been stopped during that second round as well.
Yeah, for sure. He's looked superb in his UFC tenure, and I think that his well-rounded game, I think he's going to build on that confidence with his last many wins that he's had since that Paul Craig fight, and I think it'll be too much for Krylov. I think it'll be a decision. I don't know if I think Krylov is just a very solid vet, where I don't think he's going to make too many openings for Ankalaev to expose and get a finish. I think it'll be a dominant decision win nonetheless. Yeah,
I'm with Ankalaev as well, and he's on a 5-fight win streak, to just touch on your point there.
Yeah,
but I can actually, as grisly a vet as Krylov is and as tough as he is to finish, I can actually, with Ankalaev striking, I just think he absolutely picks him apart. I do see him getting a finish late in the first, early second round. But yeah, it's an absolutely phenomenal fight.
Yeah, it's a great fight. Like we spoke about in the last few weeks about how the co-mains and the mains have been just worth it alone, and this is another great example. I know I've been just kind of tunnel vision for March onwards.
Yeah.
But this is a great way of rounding out the February, the January February section of the year. So another good fight, another great fight.
Yeah, 100%. And of course, last week with so many finishes on the card, you would hope that it'd be something similar this week. I think the matchups are, just judging by them, it leans towards a lot of decisions this week, but I hope I'm wrong in that. But in the next one, I can't see a decision. You have two girls that get in there and they're both submission specialists, which could easily mean they cancel each other out, and I'm very wrong. But you have Montana De La Rosa versus Moira Bueno Silva. How do you see this fight going?
Yeah, it's a great fight. You've got two girls who are fantastic on the mat. They're both quite well rounded anyway, but their specialities lay in the grappling. But I have Silva for this one. I think she's bigger. I think she's stronger. I know she's not as highly ranked, but I think that and she's less experienced. But I think from what I've seen of the two, I think she's the stronger grappler. I think she'll and again, going back to what you're saying about canceling themselves out, I'm not sure if there will be a submission. Again, I can see another decision, but I will go for Silva to get the win here.
Yeah. And I actually have De La Rosa in this one. I think she's just faced tougher opponents to this point. Like you say, they both have phenomenal submission victories on their record. Montana has 8 submission wins on her record. Moira has 5 submission wins on her record. One coming off Dana White's Contender Series, one coming off Tough 26. It's a great stylistic matchup. I love the matchmaking on this one. But yes, I'm leaning towards De La Rosa, just about to eke a sub against Bueno Silva.
But again, it's a toss of a coin, in my opinion. It's the matchmaking is excellent. It's probably my favorite thing about this card, and the next fight is probably the best example of a toss of a coin, to be fair.
Exactly. But the one thing I would say is, if my picking here, I'm going to give something away that I've completely lost confidence in my ability to pick. And once I did the numbers on how many underdogs there was, I said I needed to pick 2 underdogs on the card. Hence, De La Rosa was one of them. It's very bad.
Yeah, look, but again, she's only a slight underdog. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, we go back to what we haven't mentioned. I know we're saying it on paper, but like if you go look at what the bookmakers are giving, they're slight underdogs, slight favorites. There's no massive betting favorites here. You know what I mean? For in any of the card, really. So,
I think Angela Hill is the biggest betting favorite on this card. Believe it or
still not huge. Still not huge odds though, as from what I've seen. But
Yeah. And you touched on the next fight. This is a phenomenal one at bantamweight. Pedro Munoz versus Jimmy Rivera. Now, they have fought before in 2015, and Rivera pulled off a decision in an absolute world-class fight. If you haven't seen that one, if you have Fight Pass, go back and look at that fight. It was absolutely phenomenal war. For me, it was a fair decision. I know there was a lot of people questioning it after that Munoz took the last 2 rounds. For me, no, I think Rivera took the first and third rounds. But outside of that, you look at what they've done since. Pedro has gone on a somewhat of a tear until lately when he's lost to Edgar and Sterling. And Rivera, we just haven't seen as much of him since that fight. He suffers with a lot of injuries. And before the latest win against Stamen, which was a bit of a comeback fight in and of itself, he had, of course, that the two losses as well to Jan and Sterling. So both guys have lost to that elite of the division. It's a very tricky one. But when it's a rematch, I hate to pick against the guy that won before. So for that reason, I would go with Jimmy Rivera for another decision victory.
Yeah, all great points what you made there, but especially with their history. But just take that aside, both have been doing phenomenal in the bantamweight division, which is probably one of the deeper divisions now in the UFC, the deepest divisions in the world. But like, to what I want to see. And I think what both men need to see is whichever way they win, the winner needs to come out of this with a statement, because it is so stacked. If they provide us the same type of entertaining fight, great. But if someone can put a stamp on this victory with a big knockout or a big submission, a big finish, then they're straight back in there. Don't get me wrong; they've done excellent in their last few fights, and they've lost only the top tier competition, but the contenders are just so strong right now.
And there's so many at bantamweight.
Yeah, there is. Munoz looked really good. Rivera, I only seen as recent or as a fight with Jan. I thought he done really good against Jan, who's looked unstoppable. I thought he
Yeah.
put up a great fight with that. Munoz, look, I've seen it was fight with Brett Johns only recently again. So 2 fights I've only seen this week, and both guys have a very diverse skill set, like we're speaking about again. I'm going to go with Rivera on this one too, but again, it's a toss of a coin. You ask me in an hour's time, I'm going to probably pick Munoz. It's
Yeah.
it is super tight, but I think Rivera is just, if he can get busy busy with the hands. However, if Pedro Munoz decides to start throwing leg kicks like he done against Brett Johns, who Rivera is open and susceptible for, it'll all depend again who uses their brain a little bit more, who comes out with a good game plan and sticks to it. Both are excellent grapplers. Both can get good takedowns. Both are excellent on the feet. So for me, I don't know whether it'll be a fight tonight or not. This is the fight I'm most looking forward to by a mile. I'm kind of surprised it's not co-main in a way, but maybe it's because of their last loss each.
That's true, but I mean, if we're just judging it off the fight in 2015, and if we get anything like that, it would 100% be fight of the night without question. And yes, I agree. They're 2 ranked guys at bantamweight, one of the strongest divisions. It could very well be co-main event.
And I know you spoke again about this being a rematch, but I think it's actually even more exciting because of how they've looked since those fights. Yep. Both have done amazing things since those fights. They're so high level, but like I said, I think a statement is needed by one or the other, because they're not going to, whoever comes out of this is not getting an immediate title shot. There's just too many contenders in the way, but they do something very impressive. It can put them in line against another highly touted contender, and then we're talking for
the doors start to open then, of course.
Yeah,
definitely. Next up we have Angela Hill versus Ashley Yoder, and this is another phenomenal one. Angela Hill has looked very good since her return to the UFC. Now, her record won't suggest that. She's 6-7 since her return, and that making her 7-10 overall in the UFC. She's one of those girls, or I believe it's 6-9 overall in the UFC. She's just one of those girls that she's kind of found she's mid-level fighter, and she's brilliant at that level. Anytime she's come up against the top in that division, and you could argue there's 10 in that division that are world class. And anytime she's faced anyone in that top 10, she's come out the wrong side of it. And she has faced most of them, is the thing. Like, she's faced so many big names in that division. Her last 2 fights, of course, to Michelle Waterson and Claudia Gadelha, elite fighters, and hence she's on a 2-fight skid. But she looked so impressive before that, and looked like a new version of Angela Hill. Her hands were better, her wrestling was better, all her own game was better. And she's taking on Ashley Yoder, who has a similar kind of record at 8-6, is coming off a win over Granger. My concern with Yoder is she just hasn't faced the competition that Hill has. And I think Hill has just learned to be that tougher fighter in there. And I think Hill will just kind of overwhelm her to a decision victory here.
Yeah, again, performances. A lot of her losses have been by decision and split decision. And you know how judges can be, especially with split decisions. So,
yeah.
I don't think her record suggests of how good she is. And the same goes with Angela Hill. Angela Hill has been in there plenty of, and looked better lately. Even with 2 losses, she's looked great in those fights, especially the one with Michelle Waterson. It's not boxing, and I love boxing, don't get me wrong, but with fighters, most of them, especially going back to Angela Hill, who's a vet, a lot of people don't have the opportunity to build a record. They get in, they fight the toughest people. They'll take a win, take a loss, etc. So Angela Hill might be only coming into her prime. She might be only finding her legs as such. You know what I mean? So, I do predict Angela to win. I'm just hoping that she takes a little jump in level, because I think she's like you said, you're saying a mid-level fighter. I think she's a little bit better than that, but she just needs to kick on a little bit. She needs to show that she's a elite. A win over Michelle Waterson would have shown that. Now, can she get 2 wins in a row and then fight Michelle or likes it again? Yeah, I think that's possible. But I really want to see a solid performance from Angela Hill, which I'm expecting, and she has a great opponent to do so in Yoder, who's a really well-rounded fighter
and very tough as well. Yoder will bring the fight to her, I reckon. But it's just one of those fights where I think Hill has more tools in her arsenal than Yoder has.
And that's why I'm saying I think it's the perfect fight for Hill. Well, Yoder, she won't back up. She's tough. She'll be there for 3 rounds. I think Angela will land on her and land on her often. She'll kind of get to show maybe a higher array of strikes, or maybe some new things that she's been working on. It's not going to be an easy fight, but I think she'll, against the likes of Waterson. Don't get me wrong, she wasn't cagey. She was going forward, etc. But I think she'll probably get to enjoy herself a little bit more in this and let loose a little bit more.
Yeah. And the final fight on the main card, you have Alex Caceres versus Kevin Croom. Now, I do want to touch on Kevin Croom before we actually talk about this fight and give our picks, because Kevin Croom did an interview today where he lambasted the Nevada State Athletic Commission about his debut fight in the UFC being overturned into a no contest for testing positive for marijuana. And he kind of went on a bit of a tirade towards them. Do you think that's good for your career to be calling out an athletic commission, especially when fights at the moment in America are only taking place in Nevada? Do you think that's wise to be doing something along those lines?
I'd look at them. I'm sure the man is just speaking out of frustration of what previously happened, and look at it. I think just with the new ruling with USADA and with marijuana, I think maybe he probably feels like he can, and I tend to agree with him anyway. So like he's speaking his truth. So I don't really think that it'll have any consequence on what he's going to do. He seems to be a confident guy, and I think that whatever he says, I don't think it's going to cause too much of a ruckus. I think that if he goes in and beats Alex Caceres, he's going to have no problem getting fights, and plenty of good fights. And
that's true.
This is one I'm really excited for. And this is strange. So here we go. Every week we're talking about, fighters. Obviously, it's an MMA podcast. What I'm looking forward to on this one is Kevin Croom is being coached by James Krause. James Krause is a phenomenal coach. You've seen, his name slipped. He won last week, 2 weeks ago. James Krause's guy, the guy who called for Miley Cyrus.
Yes, Julian Marquez.
Yes. So, you've seen Krause, he pulled it out to win. I think Krause is excellent from a technical perspective, but he knows what to say to those guys. You know what I mean? I love his corner work. So I think I think on paper, Alex Caceres will be favored. I think Alex Caceres has better skills. I think that he's been in the octagon a lot more. So all the everything is stacking in his favor. However, I think Kevin Croom, being coached by Krause, been given a good game plan. Krause will know what the right things to say to motivate his man. I'm going to pick Kevin Croom for this. I think that he's just going to be a tough day in the office for Caceres. I think he's going to mix everything. I think he's going to not perhaps overwhelm Caceres and confuse him. So I'm going to go with Croom on this. And again, people are going to go, that's fucking crazy, but I'm going to go with Croom on this based on Kevin Krause more so than James Krause more so than Kevin Croom.
And actually, interestingly, James Krause cornered Derek Minner as well to a victory last week. And he was it was phenomenal the way you were able to hear the corner with no audience now as well. Even when he was on the ground, he was talking him through every transition on the ground against, Derek Minner against Charles Rosa. And Charles Rosa, we know, is high level on the mat. And you could hear James Krause talking him through every transition. But even he was calling for the strikes. It was phenomenal the way he was worked in the corner. But what I wanted to point to here is Kevin Croom actually has a victory over Darren Minner in LFA. Before Derek Minner moved to under James Krause. The guy does have some good victories on his record. He actually also has a victory over Charles Crazy Horse Bennett. I believe he's Charles Felony Bennett now, but so look, other than I know. But other than his debut, which at the end of the day, look, it was a 40-second, or I believe it was something like that, 50 second standing guillotine choke. It's hard to judge him based on his record. And my big worry here is the 12 losses. Because when we see 12 losses on a guy's record, it's fine, but it's outside the UFC. He has fought in LFA, he has fought in Bellator, and he's fought in some big promotions. So it's hard to judge him too bad on the 12 losses, but it's just a little bit of a hang-up for me in the fact that Caceres also has 12 losses, predominantly in the UFC. For me in this one, I'm going to have to disagree with you. I think the Caceres we're seeing at the moment is the best version of Caceres we've seen since The Ultimate Fighter. And that's going back a long time. That was tough 12 that he was on. The guy's had nearly 25 fights in the UFC, and he has wins over Chase Hooper, Peterson, and Springer in his last 3. Obviously the concern with Caceres is that when he doesn't show up, it goes catastrophically wrong for him. And it's which Caceres you're going to be. But I think there's a question mark over both, but I would side with Caceres for maybe a decision victory in this one.
Yeah, Caceres kind of reminds me of Michael Johnson in a way. You know, we see these excellent performances, and then we see a big drop off in performance. And I don't know, it just with Kevin Croom, usually fighters will pick the more technical person, will pick the prettier style, you know what I mean? But Croom isn't that. Caceres is that. But I just think that maybe Caceres will take him that a little bit lightly. That Croom will have something to prove. He's coming in to try and take Alex Caceres' steam as such. You know what I mean? So I think that with his mindset, I think with the coaching that he's getting, I've been so impressed. Like I said, with James Krause, you can hear him during the rounds giving technical advice, and then in the corner between rounds, he knows what to say to his man to get him up, to get him motivated. So I think that'll be a big part of it. And I think Croom, he'll absorb punishment in this, but I think that he'll find his way to win.
Yeah. Very true. And you did touch on James Krause before we get into our bets of the week. I do want to ask you, your training partner, of course, James Gallagher, is training over with James Krause, doing a little bit of a camp over there at the moment. What kind of an animal do you think is going to come back in James Gallagher, given the cornering he's getting now, or not the cornering, I suppose, but the coaching he's getting? Obviously, coached with John Kavanagh and now with James Krause, and we've seen the insight that Krause gives, and his knowledge of the game is frightening from what we've seen of him in the corner. What kind of animal do you see Gallagher coming back as?
Jimmy's an animal, full stop. He's excellent. Yeah. He's absolutely excellent. And people just haven't seen what James can produce. I always think it's great getting another perspective. John's the best coach in the world, in my opinion. I'm obviously going to be biased, but that's just my opinion. I've had that since day one. And I'm someone who robs John's attention probably more than most, so I know just how good he is. So I think I might just give him a better perspective, but more so than maybe working with a different coach. I think it's more his mindset. You know, he's seen COVID happening here. He said, all right, I'm out here. I'm going to put my eggs in one basket and go over to the States and get my work in. And I just think that James, just based on his last performance, I've seen him in camp. I just think he's improving every single camp. So having someone now he has 2 excellent coaches in his ear. I think we'll see another improved version of James.
Yeah, of course. And you have to factor in as well that he's getting a new look with new training partners over there as well. And there is some big names under Krause at the moment, so only positives.
Yeah, look, at always positives. But that being said, it's insane what we have on the mats in SVG in recent times. It's fucking crazy. You go for five-minute rounds, you pick a new partner each time, and each one is more fucking awful than the next. You know, it's fantastic. But yeah, I'm buzzing to see I'm always buzzing to see James. I'm more nervous for when James fights than when I fight. We used to live together, for God's sake.
Big brother syndrome.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. But I can't wait to see what he produces.
Very good. We are going to get to our bets of the week, but before we do, I have to hold my hands up and acknowledge your call last week. We made a €1 bet on the fight not going the distance between, who was it again? It was the Imavov versus I can't even think of his name. I completely blocked it out of my head. Phil Hawes.
Yeah, Hawes.
Yeah, I had to try and block it out of my head. Like, generally, when I see a fight that's not going to go the distance, there's no way. And Phil Hawes just came out with a mission to hold your man against the cage, grab a hold of the cage as much as possible. The ref gave him about 10 warnings to stop grabbing the cage, and there he was still holding onto the bloody thing. Oh, I was like a lunatic. It's a euro, but it's a painful euro. This is worse than our records all along. I don't like losing a bet to you.
Well, look, I'm going to talk about March. I as good as March the cards are, I feel like they seem to be a little bit easier to predict.
Yes.
This fucking card is a nightmare to pick.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm making my bet of the week, but to be honest, if it was me and I was just doing had my own account and doing whatever, I'm skipping this week, to be perfectly honest with you. But we'll make our bets of the week. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, no problem. My one's an easy one. I'm going with a quite simple double here. I'm going with Angela Hill and Ankalaev just to win. Like you said, that there's too many of these fights are the flip of a coin, and I think it's a tricky one to be betting on in any way, shape, or form. There's money to be made on this card, though, if you know who you're going to be picking and you get a couple of dogs, because, like you said, they're all close fights. You might even pick a couple of favourites there that would, if you've 3 or 4 in an accumulator, the odds will build up quite quickly. But for me, I'm going to keep it quite simple. Angela Hill and Ankalaev in a double. How about you?
Yeah. If things weren't so weird this year with so many underdogs winning, it'd be the perfect, not perfect, but it'd be a good card to bet. Put your favorites on an accumulator or a parlay or whatever, which way you want to put it. But it just hasn't been working out that way so far this year. I'm going to go with Ankalaev. I think he's the biggest favorite in my opinion. After that, everything else is a toss of a coin. But I'm going to go with Ankalaev. I'm going to go with Rosenstruik. But I'm also going to put Silva. I'm going to go with a triple just because you're putting in a bitch bet of a double. I'm going to I'm going to throw in a triple. Now, am I confident with triple? No. And like I said, Paul, if this was like, I wouldn't be betting on this week. Let's put it this way. I think it's a great idea. I'd be probably putting my money on Ankalaev. I'd putting all of it on him. But for the week that's in it, just for the crack, I'm going to go with Ankalaev, and Silva, and then Rosenstruik as well. Even though I'm betting on a heavyweight, like I said, I wouldn't again.
Yeah, both weeks. Very good. As you pointed to, of course, next week we have the start of March Madness, and then we have essentially 12 weeks of phenomenal cards coming up. There's
did I christen that March Madness, or
no? We've been saying that since January, so control yourself.
Put a patent in it. Trademark.
Yeah. But so you have 12 weeks of phenomenal cards, including the return of Bellator, including the return of PFL. So by the end of April, there's going to be some phenomenal fights have gone past. Of course, you're looking to a fight coming up in the near future. So we will be back next week, and we have a huge card next week. I'm excited to come, like you said, I'm excited to get on and make some picks for that one. So tune in next week. But be sure and check us out on social medias. Where can we find you, Brian?
Brian Moore MMA on Instagram and Twitter. I don't really mess around with Facebook anymore.
No problem. And you can find me at P_ODEA on Twitter. And tune in again next week, guys. Thank you very much for listening to us.